Story time. So this story is about a lady that lost her vision and went blind at the end of her life. She was a black lady born in the 1950s. She lived in a country hick town in a country hick state. She was the second to the youngest of 16 kids. So you can only imagine being black in America in a country hick town in a country hick state in the 1950s. They were pretty poor. Yeah, they were pretty poor. When Gigi was a little girl, though, she used to love to sing and dance. She loved to play basketball. She was very talented, but again, being black in America, dark-skinned at that, she's a dark-skinned black lady, very beautiful, but you know how the colorism was. So not only do you have to deal with the racism from the YT people, you have to deal with the colorism from your own people. So she kind of buried those talents because society back then was you get a husband and you have some kids. Most women, not just the black women, weren't allowed to work actual real jobs. They could have under the table jobs. Most black women probably went and cleaned up after the YT women that didn't know how to run a household, a kitchen, didn't know how to rear children, just was lazy and good for nothing. You go work for them. But more than that, you didn't have too many other opportunities for work. You couldn't have a credit card, you couldn't have a bank account and all those things. So you either was going to go and clean up after those women or you were going to get a husband. And since Gigi had decided to bury her talents because of the insecurity of having to grow up, living such an experience, she decided to get a husband. I don't blame her. Because, baby, I'm not finna do none of that. So I don't blame her. Raise your own kids, man. You get that. Anywho, so she meets a guy. We'll call him JC for the sake of the story. So her and JC, they hit it off, They hit it off. She's being well taken care of. JC is working. He's paying the bills. He saves up. He builds her a nice home on a road that I don't know if he bought that road or how he did it or pulled it off, but he ended up naming the road that he had built that home on after the family name. That was pretty much like what you call legacy building. I like it. It was nice. I don't know what happened. The legacy ain't there no more, but he built her a nice house on a street that was named after the family. So Gigi and JC end up having 2 kids, which is interesting because Gigi don't even like kids. But remember, Gigi had already buried her talents. So she had gotten good at pretending and acting like, her life was good and like she was happy when she really wasn't. And plus, that was society's thing. You either gonna go work or you gonna become a wife and a mom. She didn't want to work. She didn't want to go, clean up after them. So she became a wife and a mom. She had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. We will call them Aaron and Amanda for the sake of the story. The 2 A's. So since she don't really like kids like that, Aaron and Amanda are always at her mom's house with her siblings' kids because, she was the youngest of 16. So with the nieces, nephews, which was their cousins, they aunties, uncles, I'm sure a lot of them were probably still in the home because, they dealing with a lot of mental and emotional things. The family was close, though. The family used to be really close. They all have their stories to tell about the fights that they used to get in and the country things that they used to do, But considering the fact that I'm sure she had probably been turning a blind eye to the cheating that JC was doing, she probably had a lot of little depression and emotional and psychological issues that she was dealing with while she was pregnant with Aaron and Amanda, because Aaron used to throw cats into fires and Amanda was angry. She said when Amanda was a baby, she used to would take her fingers and dig them into people's faces, So Amanda was born extremely angry and Aaron was born psychotic or, a sociopath. I don't know. What do people that take cats by the tail like a helicopter and set them ablaze that are still alive? These kids have some mental and emotional psychological issues. And, probably stemming from the depression that she had from dealing with a cheating husband and looking at kids in the neighborhood that didn't belong to her that had his face. But it seems to be only fitting that those children would have his face, considering the fact that he himself was an outside child. When he was conceived, the man that he was conceived by was married to another woman. And it was back in the day. That was back in the 1940s, sometime back up in there. His mom was a full-blown Indian. His dad was a high yellow black man that owned a farm and had a little bread. And, the high yellow black men back then that had a little bread thought they was better than everybody. So I'm sure he was treating her terribly. So who knows, with JC's mom being an Indian and everything that America had done to the Indians, she probably was misplaced or displaced, and she needed a little financial help herself, because I hope she wasn't deeply in love with that man. But who knows? Maybe she was. Maybe they were deeply in love. Maybe she just needed a little help. Who knows? But JC himself was an outside child. And so JC ended up having a bunch of outside kids. 2 that we know of, but it probably was more. There probably are more, but it seems like that's where that, way back in the 1940s. So, anywho, Aaron and Amanda are always with Gigi's mom and Gigi's older siblings and Gigi's nieces and nephews up until they decide that they sick of living in the country. I guess they didn't want to have to keep driving miles on top of miles to get to Walmart. I'm sure that the air conditioning and things like that in the cars wasn't what they are today. By the time they made it back home, the food probably had spoiled. And, knowing them folks back then, since Gigi came from an extremely poor family, she would eat spoiled stuff and eat out the trash and things. And I guess JC was like, we're not going to keep doing this. Let's just move to the city. So that's what they did. They moved to the city. And they ended up, just adjusting to the city life. And so Aaron and Amanda grow up at this point and know they had never really gotten help for their mental, emotional, and psychological issues. As a matter of fact, they went through a few things that just kind of made it a little bit worse. Aaron goes off to college. He do that. Amanda ends up meeting a guy in high school, and she falls in love with this guy. This guy probably didn't care too much about her. Who knows? You know how that goes. This was the 80s at this point. Teen pregnancy was at an all-time high. All the girls were in competition with each other. The guy that Amanda had met, we will call him Ben. So she, is up fighting the girls that Ben is cheating on her with, because, she ain't gonna be like her mama and just put up with it. She gonna beat them bitches up because, she got her anger issues. She came into the world squeezing people's faces as a baby. So, he ends up getting accused of being the baby daddy of one of the girls at the high school. And so to one up the girl that was claiming that she was Ben's baby mama, Amanda decides that she's going to get pregnant. So Amanda ain't even graduated high school, and she gets pregnant. And, Gigi is highly offended and feeling some type of way, because at this point Gigi had found God. She was Christian and all of that, and the fornication and children outside of marriage, you're bringing a bastard into the family, all of the stuff, all of the things. Aaron finds out, he gets mad, he goes to find Ben and fight him. And anywho, so Amanda she has the baby. She decides that, she wants to name the baby Brandy. And so Amanda and Ben, they get married. But once again, Amanda's not too happy because Ben is out here having all kind of children outside of the marriage. She tries to leave Ben because of that. And Ben decides that he's going to move to a different state, but then he comes back to visit and, he's going to coerce Amanda because they in this whole long, insane love affair that they should have never been in from middle school all the way up to the point of 21, 22, one of them, who knows. But Amanda ends up getting pregnant again. She has another baby while this man in a whole nother state. But it's his baby, though, because he came to visit and coerced her, which, to me, coercion, when somebody tells you no repeatedly, even though you didn't completely force them, coercion is great without the G. So here we are constantly having children out of karmic situations. Anywho. So at this point, Gigi has just completely just shut down. She already was neglecting the kids and wasn't really, all the way there anyway, somewhere in the sunken place. And at this point, she's just sick of all of it. Inflation was happening. She just was like, what women do. Now, I'm not saying that she did this, but you remember that scene in Medea when they was like, you bake a sweet potato pie and you be at the casino by 5. Yeah, I doubt it was that. I doubt it was, that simple to it. But JC is no longer with us. I don't know if her and Aaron decide to get together and cook some things up because they had. So, I'm guessing they was on hard times financially because taking care of a family in the country is a completely different thing from taking care of a family in the city. So, or did they really fall on hard times? Remember Gigi had checked out at this point. Gigi is in the sunken place because the depression and the resentment and all of that other stuff that she was harboring from burying her talents and turning a blind eye to them kids in the neighborhood that had her husband's face and having to, hold a child while dragging the other one, probably still not physically, but metaphorically. Because, JC used to have to do a lot of traveling. So for work, because he worked in construction. So he had to do a lot of traveling for work. So she was with them kids by herself, holding one and dragging the other. Even though they were older, she may not have been doing it physically, but she dang sure was doing it metaphorically. She had checked out at this point. So were they really on hard times, or was JC giving her the money and she was just forgetting to pay the bills? Was she on the Home Shopping Network? Was she, because baby, she is materialistic at this point. Still to this day, she's very materialistic, extremely materialistic. But that happens with a lot of women that are dealing with depression and resentment and, regret. They become materialistic. They use that material stuff to cover up those emotions instead of just facing them and dealing with them. So who's to say if they were even on hard times, or if she probably was just lying to Aaron and telling Aaron that because she wanted Aaron to pay the bill so she could make it seem like the JC that she used the money that he gave her to pay the bills. Who knows, but whatever. JC ain't with us no more. JC ain't with us no more. They, I'm sure some life insurance was handed out and all of a sudden, Gigi and Aaron are good financially again. Amanda off somewhere chasing Ben and, just left out. But Gigi and Aaron, they're doing well financially again. So, yeah, that happens. And so, a few years go by. At this point, Amanda had left Ben. She done moved on. Aaron had found him some weird woman to marry. And, he starts a business with that life insurance money. The weird woman he married, she got a little money. He done tricked her into. So, he done tricked this weird woman that he done married into using her money to put a down payment on a house. Cause they figures out their way into large amounts of money, So that's, we on down the line. Gigi is older now. She has went back to school because she swears up and down that she was left nothing after JC died. She just didn't know what she was going to do. So she goes back to school and she becomes, a prominent figure in the medical field. She's making good money at this point. And, Aaron has his business. He's doing pretty good. Amanda had went to school or back to school. I don't know. She's doing okay though, because she do a lot of settling. She was already born with anger issues, and then she, went through what she went through. So she do a lot of settling. A lot of that's good enough for me, except for with vehicles. She like nice cars, but other than that, everything else this is good enough for me. Yeah, and so. I guess Gigi, she does a lot of working because she does help Amanda out with the children a lot. And she gets lonely, I guess. She gets lonely and she gets tired of being lonely. And she meets this man. We'll call him Willie for the sake of the story. She don't know Willie from a can of paint. But I guess she's just so lonely and just so stuck in a time loop from all of that resentment and all of that depression and all of that regret and anger built up in her body, and probably grief too, because, JC had been there. She probably was just so used to him. So grief too, she was just in a hellish vibration. So, misery loves company. She wanted her some company, baby. So she meets Willie, and she just so desperate to continue to repeat this loop that she starts bringing the grandchildren, Brandy and Brachet, what we call the other one. She brings the grandchildren around Willie, and Willie do what men that seek out women with small children do to Brandy. And she says, because later on, Brandy eventually tells on this man, because Brandy ain't them. She ain't built like them. Brandy built a little different. So she eventually like, hey, he groping and touching parts of that he shouldn't be groping and touching. And she sets up with this weird look on her face. She just looks at him like she's just so disappointed. And when, you look back at it, you can tell by that look that she knew. She knew that Willie was doing that to her 9-year-old grandchild. She said it because, as Brandy got older and time went on, Brandy asked her, and she said, I had a feeling, because he would send me off to the grocery store and I would tell him that I was going to take y'all with me. And he would say that you can just leave them here. And I would be like, no, I don't want to leave them on you. And he would insist that I leave y'all with him. That's what Gigi turning a blind eye. Turning a blind eye. You had a feeling. So your instinct, your intuition was telling you, and you ignored, just like your instinct and your intuition was probably telling you about the shit that JC was doing. And you just turn a blind eye. And this time, you really can't claim that it's for money, because you have a career, a good one at this time. But as her and Brandy continue to talk about this, because Brandy ain't built like them, she don't turn no blind eye. She trying to work through these emotions and figure out what's really going on. So she's talking to her about it, and she said, well, after Brandy told it, she called to talk to Gigi, and Gigi don't pick up the phone. Instead, Willie picks up the phone. And so Brandy just hung up the phone, and Brandy's trying to figure out, why is this man still there? At that point, Brandy was 12, but when she has this conversation with Gigi, she's grown. So she decides to ask, why did you stay with him after being told what he was doing. And Gigi states, I needed him for his money. So in other words, Gigi's so far gone and lost off in the sunken place somewhere that she pimped out her granddaughter. She don't even realize it, but that's what she did. You stayed with a Chester for his money. She said, I needed his money to help with y'all. But yet, the grandkids, Amanda and the kids is living in the hood. In a impoverished, it wasn't that impoverished, but it was impoverished compared to how her and Aaron was living. It was impoverished compared to how her and Aaron was riding. It was kind of suspicious. It was kind of suspicious. But they do their little hoobly jubilee bippity boppity boo to put you in a sunken place, and you don't really notice how suspicious it is that they live in high luxury vehicles, mansion style homes, and Amanda and her kids is in the hood, scraping, barely making it. Amanda has started over consuming herself, still angry, still fighting everything and everybody, while they're living this lavish life, lying to people and making it seem like something wrong with Amanda, when the whole time is really something wrong with Gigi and Aaron. There's some weird, they on some occult type this, and you really, anywho. So time goes by, and Brandy is still asking questions. She's still periodically having emotional breakdowns about it, and still, every now and then cuss the whole family out about it. And so one day, she targets that anger towards Amanda as to why is this man still in the family? Why is he still around? And Amanda states, get over it. That's what Amanda told her. Get over it. And so Brandy looks at Amanda and says, how dare you tell me to get over something and you don't know how I feel? And Amanda states, you can't tell me I don't know how you feel when my uncles them used to do the same thing to us. So you mean to tell me Gigi Brothers was doing, so we sitting up here thinking Amanda just angry, just emotionally weird, emotionally strange for no reason at all. And the whole time, Gigi's brothers were doing the same thing to Amanda. So Gigi was turning a blind eye to her brothers who were being inappropriate with her own daughter, to her husband who was being inappropriate to women around the neighborhood and with women around the neighborhood, to her own son who was throwing cats into fires, and to her second husband that preferred children. Turning a blind eye. She buried her talents. She turned a blind eye to her own unhappiness. She turned a blind eye to her own regret. She turned a blind eye to the sexually deviant, disgusting men around her. And she wonders why it is that she lost her vision and is going blind now that she's at the end of her life. You did all of that. Turned a blind eye to this man, stayed with him for his money, and you're still going to pass alone, miserable, a widower, and blind. That's the legacy you decide to leave? What kind of shit is that? Because, you know, the second husband, he didn't went on to purgatory. Because he sure ain't went to glory. He didn't went on to purgatory. And so just imagine, in that big old mansion style home, alone. Blind and alone. Oh, child, that's terrible. That is terrible. Y'all need to stop sweeping stuff up under the rug. These malevolent matriarchs is what that makes you. A malevolent matriarch. On a slow fall. Well, no, you don't have to die to experience hell. You already there. That's why you want so much company. I don't understand why Amanda's still around, still talking to them folks like they ain't doing all type of high level sorcery and stuff, all just done tore her life upside down. And Aaron's funny looking, fake, ugly wife sitting over there like she don't see, and she will same fate, blind. You don't see? You want to be able to just enjoy the fruit, the poisoned fruit. Over there enjoying all that poisoned fruit, baby, it's gonna start to eat you up from the inside out. But anywho, that's the end of the story. If you enjoyed it, comment, like, subscribe. If I put it on Facebook, follow, whatever. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.